The first time I saw Lewis Merrow, I thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion, the kind that comes from dragging your whole life into cardboard boxes and pretending it still counts as progress. It was my second night in Briar Hollow, Ohio, and I had woken up thirsty at 12:41 in the morning, padding into the kitchen barefoot, half asleep, trying to drink water like it was a normal human ritual and not a way to convince myself that I had not completely fallen apart after the divorce. The duplex was old, built in the late 40s, with floors that complained if you walked too fast and walls that carried sound in strange ways. My half looked ordinary enough: beige siding, a small porch, a driveway that fit one car if you parked perfectly. The other half was darker, like the paint had absorbed too many winters. The listing had not said anything about the neighbor, and the landlord had tossed the place at me with that tired smile people use when they want you to stop asking questions. Quiet neighborhood, good for a fresh start, he had said. That night, the porch light on the other side clicked on by itself. It was a dim yellow bulb that buzzed like a trapped fly. I looked out through the kitchen window, and there he was, standing under it as if he had been waiting to be lit. An older man in a brown wool coat and a brimmed hat, hands folded in front of him, posture stiff and patient. He did not smoke, did not pace, did not look at a phone. He just stood there, staring at the empty street, like the street owed him something. I watched for a full minute, and then he turned his head, slow and precise, like a clock hand, and looked directly at my kitchen window. His face was pale and neat, almost gentle at first glance, until the stillness of it started to feel wrong. He raised two fingers in a small wave. It did not feel friendly. It felt formal, like a gesture you would get at a funeral. I waved back, because I am polite, because I was tired, because my brain was lagging and normal manners kicked in before survival instincts did. He lowered his hand, held my gaze a little too long, then slipped back inside without a sound. The porch light clicked off the moment the door shut, as if the night had been given permission to behave again. I stood there a while, water glass sweating in my hand. I checked the clock above the stove and felt my stomach tighten because the time was no longer 12:41. It read 12:40, as if the digits had blinked and decided to go backward. I told myself it was a power glitch, a cheap clock, a moving day brain. I went back to bed and did not sleep. In daylight the next morning, he looked more real, and that somehow made it worse. I was hauling boxes from my car when the door of the other unit opened, and he stepped out as quietly as a thought. He looked mid to late 60s, hair combed back, coat buttoned to the throat even though the air was mild. His eyes were a thin grey, like fog on asphalt. He smiled in a way that felt practiced. He said that I must be Jonathan Lane. I froze with a box in my arms because I had not introduced myself to anyone in town. My last name was not on the mailbox yet. I had signed the lease online. I did not even have Ohio plates. I asked how he knew my name. He said people leak, and he said it the way someone might explain the weather, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He offered his hand. I shook it because I did not know what else to do. His skin was cold, not cold like winter air, cold like metal in a parking garage. When he let go, the chill stayed on my palm. He introduced himself as Lewis Merrow and told me welcome to Briar Hollow. He told me the town was quiet, polite, predictable, and he said predictable like it was a blessing. I tried to joke that predictable was what I was paying for. His eyes drifted past me to the passenger seat of my car where an open box sat, and inside it was a framed photo I had not meant to keep on top. A picture of me and my ex-wife at a baseball game from the era when our smiles were still honest. He told me I should tuck it away, no sense bleeding in front of strangers. That sentence landed in my chest like a thumb pressed hard. He did not sound cruel. He sounded almost gentle, and that was what made my skin crawl. I asked him what he meant. He called it neighborly advice, nodded once and went inside. No goodbye, no wave. Just ended like the interaction had been scheduled. I should have left right then, packed the boxes back into the car and driven anywhere else, any town that did not come with a neighbor who could read your life like mail. But starting over takes a certain kind of stubbornness, and I had already spent my energy and my pride getting to Briar Hollow. I told myself he was just observant. I told myself small towns talk. I told myself anything that let me keep moving forward. Briar Hollow looked safe in the way brochures look safe. Tree-lined streets, neat lawns, porch swings, the soft soundtrack of distant dogs and sprinklers. People smiled and asked polite questions that were really inventory. The woman across the street, Diane, introduced herself like she'd been waiting for me to arrive. She was friendly in a confident, nosy way, the kind of person who could run a neighborhood watch and a bake sale without changing tone. When I asked about Louis, her face brightened as if I had mentioned a local celebrity. She told me he was sweet, strange, but sweet. She said he knew things. She laughed about it like it was charming. She told me he had predicted her husband getting a promotion before the interview even happened, down to the day. She told me he had predicted the sex of a baby before the ultrasound. She told me he had warned someone not to take a certain route, and a wreck had happened on that route later that day. I asked her how he would know any of that. She shrugged and said it was like he listened to the town. During the day, the other half of the duplex felt empty. No television noise, no footsteps, no water running, not even the click of a mailbox. I did not see Louis outside when other neighbors were outside, but at night he appeared. The porch light on his side would click on. The air would feel denser, colder in a way that did not match the weather. Some nights he stood on the porch. Some nights he stood at the end of the driveway, staring at the street. Some nights he was in the backyard near the fence, hands folded, still as a scarecrow. The first secret he told me was small, and it still made my blood run cold. It was a Tuesday morning. I was taking out trash, still half asleep, when he stepped out, as if he had been waiting behind the door for the sound of my footsteps. He looked at me with that calm, foggy focus and said I was not sleeping. I said that I slept. He said not much, and he said the stadium dream kept waking me. I'd been having that dream since the divorce, a stadium full of roaring people, me alone on the field holding something I could not see, and the lights shutting off one by one until the crowd turned into a single living dark. I had not told anyone, not my friends, not my therapist, not even my sister. I had been too embarrassed and too afraid that it meant I was worse than I admitted. I asked how he knew. He said it did not matter how, and he told me to avoid coffee after 2 in the afternoon. He said it helped, then went inside. That night I tried to stay awake on purpose, like refusing sleep could refuse the dream. I watched television until my eyes burned. I scrolled my phone until my thumb cramped. Near midnight, my phone clock glitched and showed 12:41, then snapped back to 12:40. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened. A whispering sound slid through the shared wall, not loud, not clear. It sounded like someone talking through glass, syllables pressed and muffled. I pressed my ear to the wall, and for a few seconds the whispering sharpened enough to carry emotion. Panic, pleading, a voice thin with terror. Then it stopped, sudden as a lid sealing. I told myself it was pipes. I told myself it was wind. I told myself I was tired. But my body had already decided the truth, and it stayed awake all night. The first time I understood that Louis was not predicting, he was collecting. It happened to a woman named Marisol. She lived 3 houses down, a nurse who worked long shifts. She always looked tired and determined, like she was holding her life together with routine. One evening I came home and saw her sitting on her front steps with a phone pressed to her ear, crying without sound. Her shoulders shook. She rubbed her forehead like she was trying to erase something. I started toward her, and she lifted her hand without looking, a wordless signal to leave her alone. I went inside and made tea, and when I looked out 10 minutes later, she was gone. Lewis was on his porch. He stood under the buzzing light, staring down the street toward her house. He did not move. The darkness around him looked thicker, like it had gathered there on purpose. The next morning, Marisol did not show up for work. The police came, then the ambulance. Diane told me later that they found Marisol in her bathtub. No note, no explanation that made sense. Briar Hollow did what small towns do with tragedy. It whispered it into a story, then into a warning, then into background noise. That night, the whispering came again through the shared wall, louder than before, and this time the cadence matched the voice I had heard faintly from Marisol's porch when she tried to hide her crying. It was muffled, as if trapped, and it kept repeating a pleading phrase that never finished. I stepped back so fast I hit the dresser. My pulse slammed in my throat. The whispering faded again, like something had tightened the lid. The next day, I ran into Lewis at the grocery store under fluorescent light. He stood at the end of the cereal aisle, coat buttoned, hat on, hands folded, like he belonged in that aisle the way dust belongs in old corners. He told me he was sorry about the nurse. I asked if he knew her. He said he knew her future. I asked what that meant. He leaned closer, like he was sharing a pleasant secret, and said that she was going to leave, but she chose the wrong kind of leaving. The words felt wrong in my ears, like they did not belong in a normal world. I asked him what he had done. His expression tightened, not angry, offended, like I had accused him of being rude. He said he did not push, he did not drag, he only told. People did the rest. Then he told me to check my phone that night because my ex-wife would call and say she missed me and she would not mean it. At 9:13 that night, my phone rang. My ex-wife's name lit up the screen. I answered. She said she missed me. She cried. She apologized. She asked if I was doing okay. She sounded hollow under the words, like she was reading from a script she did not write. We talked 5 minutes. Then she said she had to go. When the call ended, my porch light flickered. I went to the window. Lewis stood on his porch in the dark, facing my front door. He raised 2 fingers in that formal wave. From his coat pocket came a faint, muffled sound, like whispering pressed against glass. I did not sleep. I sat in the living room with every light on, watching the shared wall. The whispering returned after 2 in the morning. Not one voice, many overlapping murmurs like a crowd in a theater before a show begins. The voices carried emotion more than words. Fear, regret, a desperate insistence. It was not noise, it was presence. The next morning I called the landlord, Ron, and asked about Lewis. Ron sounded tired, like my question had interrupted his coffee. He said Lewis paid on time, never caused issues, and he told me not to overthink it. I asked how long Lewis had lived there. Ron said years, longer than most. I asked if Ron knew that Lewis seemed absent in daylight. Ron laughed and said old people kept odd hours, then hung up. I went to the Briar Hollow Library because libraries in small towns are where the town hides its bones. The librarian, Mrs. Kettering, had the soft patience of someone who had watched generations come and go. I asked about the history of the duplex, pretending I was interested in old buildings. She stared at me for a long moment, then said the building had a basement fire in 1979. I asked who lived there. She said Lewis Merrow. I asked if he died. She nodded. She said it was electrical, an accident, and people talked anyway. I went through the newspaper archives on microfilm until my eyes watered. There was a grainy photo of a man in a brimmed hat and a brown coat, pale face, foggy eyes, looking into the camera like it owed him. The article described unusual hoarding, shelves in the basement filled with sealed glass containers. The police removed them and destroyed them. Destroyed. Then why did I hear voices like trapped breath through the wall at night? I drove home shaking. The other side of the duplex looked dead in daylight. Windows dark, no movement, a building that should have been empty. That night, the porch light on Lewis' side clicked on. I watched from my living room window. He walked into the backyard, moving smoothly, but with a stiffness that made my skin crawl, like his joints did not match his steps. He went to the side of the house and opened a cellar door I had never noticed, half hidden under dead vines. A thin breath of air rose from it, and even from my window I could see a faint mist curling upward, darker than the night, like smoke that did not want to leave. Then the whispering started, and this time it did not come through my wall. It drifted up from that open cellar like voices escaping a jar with a loose lid. I do not know what kind of person I thought I was until I found myself outside at 12:44 in the morning, stepping across frost-stiff grass toward that open cellar door. I always imagined I would call the police, lock the door, stay safe. But the sound felt like suffering, and my curiosity had built pressure in my chest for days. I reached the cellar steps and looked down. The darkness below was thick, heavy, as if light would get tired trying to enter. From deep inside, I heard Lewis' voice, low and careful, the way you speak to an animal you do not trust. He sounded like he was calming something. I stepped down one stair. The wood creaked. Silence snapped into place so suddenly my ears felt full. Lewis spoke from the darkness, and he was not speaking to the voices. He was speaking to me. He said I should not come down there because I would spill something I could not clean up. My lungs stopped working for a second. I whispered that he was dead. A match flared. The basement bloomed with flickering light. Shelves lined the walls, dozens of shelves. On them sat glass jars of every size, sealed with wax and cloth and twine, like someone had turned canning into religion. Inside each jar, black mist swirled like trapped breath. Some jars trembled faintly, as if something inside tapped against the glass. Many jars had labels, not dates, not contents, names. Diane, Ron, Mrs. Kettering, Marisol, and on the nearest shelf, close enough to read clearly, a jar labeled with my name, Jonathan Lane. My knees weakened. I grabbed the rail. Lewis stepped into the matchlight. Up close, the illusion frayed. His coat looked too stiff, like it had never been washed. His skin looked waxy. His eyes were empty in a way I cannot explain without sounding insane. He looked like a man wearing the memory of a man. I asked what it was. He glanced at the jars like a collector glancing at a prize shelf. He said, people waste their futures, they throw them away, they pretend they can escape what is coming. He said he preserved it. I said I heard Marisol. I said it was her. Lewis lifted the jar labeled Marisol and cradled it like it was fragile. The mist inside shivered. A muffled voice pressed through the glass, pleading, thin with terror. Lewis looked at it with something like tenderness. He said it was not the whole person, just the part that spilled when they believed him. That sentence made my stomach turn because suddenly I understood the structure. He told people what would happen. He told them with calm certainty. And when they believed him, when they accepted the future as inevitable, something inside them loosened. Fear made choices thinner, certainty made them weaker. And when the right night came, their future spilled out like breath into his hands. He set the jar back on the shelf and said the best part was that once he had a piece, the rest came easier. I ran. I turned and sprinted up the stairs, slammed the cellar door, stumbled into the backyard, gasping like I had surfaced from deep water. I locked myself inside my house, turned on every light, checked every window twice, like brightness could negotiate with what lived next door. At 2:07 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It said my jar was already labeled. I did not respond. I threw the phone onto the couch like it was contaminated. The whispering started inside my house, not through the shared wall now, from my vents, from the hollow under the stairs, from the closet where I had shoved coats. It rose and fell like the house was full of people who wanted to speak. Under all those murmurs, steady as a heartbeat, I heard my own voice whispering words I had not said. I heard myself apologizing, repeating it like a confession I could not stop. The next morning I tried to leave. I packed clothes into a bag, grabbed my laptop, my wallet, essentials. I told myself I would drive to Columbus, stay with a friend, figure it out later. I did not care about the deposit. I did not care about furniture. I cared about breathing. When I opened my front door, I stopped. Red wax had been pressed into the wood near the lock, still glossy like a seal, twine wrapped around the doorknob with a piece of cloth tied neatly. I ripped it away, and beneath it a symbol had been carved lightly into the wood, a circle with a small mark inside, like a lid, like a jar. I slammed the door shut. The whispering in the vents grew louder, excited. That night, the porch light on my side clicked on by itself. I looked through the peephole. Lewis stood on my porch. Not his porch, mine. He knocked once, gentle, polite, like a neighbor asking for sugar. He said my name softly. He said I moved here to disappear, but I brought too much with me. He listed it like inventory, regret, anger, love that turned rotten. He said it was rich and worth preserving. The whispering inside my walls swelled into a low chorus, and my body did the only thing it could think of. I ran out the back door, jumped into my car, and drove until the duplex became a shrinking dot. I hit the highway heading west, not caring where I ended up as long as Briar Hollow was behind me. I told myself ghosts had limits. I told myself distance would cut the thread. My phone buzzed again, even though I had turned it off earlier. Another unknown text appeared on the black screen, as if the phone itself had become a mouth. It warned that 1 mile ahead I would see brake lights. A cold wave crawled up my spine. I lifted my foot from the gas. 1 mile later, the highway bloomed red. Cars slowed. A semi-truck had jackknifed across lanes. Hazard lights flashed. A pileup started to form. If I had been going the speed I was going, I would have hit it full force. I pulled onto the shoulder and sat there shaking. That was the moment I understood Lewis was not just predicting, he was arranging. He warned people, and the warning became the lever. If they believed him, they moved, and he collected the spill. I drove slower after that, hands clenched until my fingers ached. I checked into a cheap motel 2 towns over. I shoved a chair under the handle like a cliché because clichés exist for a reason. I kept the lights on. I sat on the bed and tried to breathe. I called my sister in Michigan because I needed a voice that belonged to my life before this. She answered, startled, asking what was wrong. The moment I opened my mouth, the line filled with whispering. Not static, not interference. Voices layered and anxious as if pressed against the microphone from the other side. Then Lewis' voice cut through, calm and amused. He warned me to be careful because I leaked when I panicked. I yanked the phone away and ended the call with shaking fingers. My sister's voice sounded faint and distorted through the speaker, calling my name as if she was underwater. At 3 in the morning, the motel room light flickered. One soft knock sounded at the door, then another. Lewis' voice came through the door, muffled but unmistakable. He said it was a good choice. Motel rooms had thin walls, lots of leaks, lots of stories passing through. The whispering started in the motel vents, rising like a tide. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the air had been replaced with something heavier. Lewis said, I thought he was the house, but the house was only where he learned. I shouted at him, asking what he wanted. He answered in a voice that sounded almost tender. He said he wanted what I tried to bury, the part of me that believed I could start over without paying for what came before. He called it the best kind of future, the one that believes it is free. The chair under the door handle scraped across the floor by itself, slow, steady, as if pulled by an unseen hand. The door handle turned slightly, testing the seal. Lewis said I would come back, everyone did, because it was easier to surrender your future than carry it. The handle stopped, the air cooled. The whispering settled into a low murmur, like an audience sitting down. Footsteps drifted away down the hallway, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. I did not sleep. At sunrise, I felt no relief, only the sick certainty that leaving Briar Hollow had not unplugged anything. It had just relocated the haunting. I drove again, back roads, highways, any direction that felt like escape. but the whispering followed. It slid into my ears at red lights. It crept into the silence between songs on the radio. I turned the radio off, and the whispering filled the gap like it was waiting for that. At a truck stop that night, I slept in my car in a bright parking lot because I wanted light and movement and noise, the opposite of Briar Hollow. At 12:40 in the morning, my dashboard clock blinked and reset. I felt my breath catch. A soft tapping came from the trunk. Tap, 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 patient like something inside glass asking to be acknowledged. I did not open the trunk. I did not get out. I started the car and drove until sunrise, until my hands cramped from gripping the wheel. By the third day, I was exhausted enough that the roads began to curl back into Ohio without me noticing, like the map itself had become a noose. My GPS glitched. My phone stayed dead no matter how long I charged it. The closer I got to Briar Hollow, the quieter the world felt, as if sound was being absorbed. When I crossed the sign that welcomed me back, my dashboard clock clicked from 12:40 to 12:41 and froze there. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car staring at the duplex like it was a mouth I had walked back into. The porch light on Lewis' side was on, buzzing gently. Lewis stood beneath it, hands folded, hat brim low, exactly the way he had the first night. He raised 2 fingers in that formal wave. I got out because my body was tired of running. Lewis nodded as if he approved. He said everyone came back. I asked what he was. He said he was a man who died, and a man who listened while he burned. He said he heard futures spilling in the dark while nobody came for him. He said when he learned how to hold them, he stopped being alone. I asked about the jars. He said they were pieces, moments, endings, the part of you that becomes certain. He said certainty was the easiest thing to bottle. His eyes drifted toward my front door. He said my jar was already sealed. I turned and saw fresh red wax on my door again, thicker this time, pressed like a stamp, twine wrapped around the knob, a cloth tag dangling from it with neat handwriting. Jonathan Lane leaving. My stomach dropped. Lewis said the moment I believed him on the highway, the moment I lifted my foot because I trusted his warning, I gave him the most important thing. I asked what. He said permission. The whispering rose from inside my house, swelling into a chorus. I heard Marisol's muffled plea. I heard Diane panicked sob. I heard voices I could not place, stacked on each other like jars in darkness. And beneath them all, my own voice kept apologizing, steady as a heartbeat. Lewis reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small glass jar, sealed with red wax. Inside it, black mist swirled. Pressed against the glass from within was the shape of a human hand. Fingers splayed, begging to be seen. The label read, Marisol. He slipped it back into his pocket like it was a wallet. He said, I understood now. I wanted to lunge at him, rip the coat off, prove there was nothing there. But my body refused, pinned by the terrible knowledge that he had rules, systems, patience. He had been dead since 1979, and he looked at time the way people look at weather. Something that comes, something that goes, something you can plan for. Lewis stepped backward into the shadows by his door. The porch light clicked off as he disappeared, like night itself obeyed him. I stood alone in my driveway, listening to the whispering inside my walls, like the house was full of people who had already lost. I'm writing this now because writing feels like the only thing that still belongs to me. I do not trust my phone, my laptop, or my own voice. I do not trust anything that carries sound, because sound is how he collects. If you ever meet a neighbor who knows your secrets before you say them, who predicts your life with calm certainty, who is mostly seen at night under a buzzing porch light, do not treat it like a quirky gift. Do not let the warning change what you do next. The moment you believe him, your future loosens. And somewhere beneath an old house, in a basement that still smells like fire, a careful dead hand writes your name on a label, seals a lid with fresh wax, and waits for you to come back, because you always do.